Steve! Hey, Steve! I heard someone call my name as I walked through the expo. Turning toward the voice that called my name, I smiled. Hey, Tom. Haven't seen you in a while. Glancing at the logo on his polo shirt, I added, This isn't the same company you used to work for. I hope this was a step forward for you. A slight grimace appeared on his face. It was more like a step sideways. Anyway, how about we get together later and figure it out, suggested Hebe. Sure. I'll be done around 5. I'll meet you at the hotel bar then. He confirmed, then headed for his booth as I walked on. Tom couldn't be called a good friend, but in our business you have to run into the same people at most conferences. We had met a few times over the years and got along quite well. Being not just casual acquaintances, but not really good friends, we discussed our families and life in general, but without much detail. I had noticed that he had been missing these conferences for the last couple years and was glad to have him back. I'm sure we'll have a great time talking about our lives. So, new job? I asked, sitting down next to him and ordering myself a drink. Yes. I had a disagreement with my old company and we parted ways. Wow, that's a tough one. Is that why you haven't been to these conferences the last couple years? Yeah, I had to work my way up from the bottom again. No matter how much experience I had before, they want to see employees with more experience in the booth who are more familiar with their products and services. Well, that makes sense. So, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? How's the wife and kids? I asked, wanting to change the subject. His face darkened. Jen divorced me, he replied, and since I had to move 3 states away for this job, I hardly ever see my kids. Oh, that's tough. Did she find out about you cheating on her? You were always bragging to all of us about sleeping with married women on your trips out of town, weren't you? What was the name of the last one? Mary? I remember you talked about her a lot. You'd been seeing her for a couple months at the time. He smiled. Yeah, hell, she was hot. She'd been putting off having kids with her husband for a couple months to sow her last wild oats. Are you still in touch with her? No. She suddenly stopped returning my calls and even blocked my number shortly after the last conference I was at. I think I met with her one more time and then everything went to hell. In fact, it was the video of her and me that Jen used in the divorce to leverage the prenup. It also cost me my job. They fired you for infidelity? I asked in amazement. Isn't that illegal? A look of anger appeared on his face. Of course they didn't fire me for infidelity. She made me come into the office just as we were going into our monthly meeting. The little blonde bitch who served me the divorce papers loudly announced that I had been served with a divorce petition on the grounds of adultery. Then her father, the CEO of the company, set his accounting dogs on me and started going through all my expense reports for the last few years, lunches, dinners, motel rooms, everything. They even called my clients to see if I had actually had lunch and dinner with them at the time. Not only did they fire me on the line, but they sued me demanding back pay. I still owe them about $10K to this day. He also cut me out of the industry. Wow, that's rude, I commented. If he cut you out, how did you get the job? It wasn't easy, he remarked. For one thing, I had to take a big pay cut. I have 20 years of experience, but I'm paid the same as a guy fresh out of college. My base salary sucks, so I have to work 100 hours a week just to get enough commissions to get by. Secondly, the owner of this company really dislikes Jen's dad, so he wasn't really worried about being discredited. Well, that's good for you. At least you're making decent money and can pay child support. That's not the worst of it. Jen wasn't just thirsty for blood, she wanted my bone marrow too. Since the accounting department had all the receipts, they knew all the places, times, and dates. Her dad hired a good firm of private investigators to track everything down. They found over a dozen other women I'd slept with. A package was delivered to the husbands of each of them. Of course, the lawsuits for alienation of affection went nowhere, except to ruin my reputation. The problem was that several of the husbands had their children's DNA tested. What the hell is going on with these bitches? If you are going to cheat on your husbands, you need to use birth control. 3 husbands sued me for child support. I had to trade in my BMW for a used Ford Focus. Of course, I was kicked out of my house. It was in Jen's name, a gift from her father shortly before we were married. Now I live in a tiny studio apartment in the lousiest neighborhood in town. I work very hard and I don't have any extra money, so I have no social life. The only time I can afford a drink is when I'm traveling and can pay for it as entertainment for a client. My only hope right now is that Jen marries the guy I hear she's dating and stops paying child support. Hell, I'll even sign up for him to adopt my kids to stop paying child support. I have no way to see them now anyway. Wow, I remarked. Sounds like you've really pissed off the wrong people. By this time, he was drinking his fourth glass. I wondered if he had enough money to pay the bar tab. Listen, Steve, you and I have been kind of friends for years. I'm really desperate. I really need a good sale. I can get you a really good price, and I know there's a lot of our merchandise you can use. Give me a list of what you need, and I'll beat any other price you can get on them. Damn. It was sad to see this once proud man now begging. Tell you what, let's just enjoy this evening and we'll talk business tomorrow. After all, like you said, we've been friends for years, I suggested. He smiled, thinking he'd get a good order from me. Okay, buddy, I've been sitting around telling her about my shitty life. What was going on with you? Well, Tom, for the last couple years, my life has been remarkably similar to yours, with a couple of differences. Really? He asked, eyes wide with surprise. Yes. You see, I'm divorced too. Fortunately, we didn't have children yet. Did you cheat on her too? No. Quite the opposite. You see, I was sitting in a bar similar to this one, talking to a customer. I overheard some knucklehead bragging about all the women he'd screwed on the side. I just laughed at the whole thing until I heard him talking about one particular woman. That got my attention. Back home, I installed cameras in all of our rooms, tapped her phone, and installed GPS units in her car and purse. It didn't take me long to catch her cheating on me. I was able to videotape her having fun with that prick. He listened to me with rapt attention. He was a little too drunk to pick up on the subtle hints. And what did you do? He asked. I switched completely to BTBs. Actually, it was BTBs, plural. Not only did I burn her, but I decided to burn the bastard. A glimmer of something flashed in his eyes. Maybe something was shining through the alcoholic fog. Hey, you know, in all the years we've known each other, we've never once shown each other pictures of our families, exclaimed I. Here's a picture of my ex-wife, proclaimed I, opening the picture on my phone. His face immediately turned white. But it's... he hissed. Yeah, I agreed. That's the slut you bragged about screwing at the last conference you attended. You, he accused. Yep, me. You ruined my life. I couldn't keep from laughing. Well, you had my wife. You should know that actions have consequences. It was just sex, he pleaded. It didn't mean anything. In fact, it meant everything. I didn't know she was your wife. It didn't matter. You knew she was someone else's wife. Besides, you knew you were married too. Remember the vow to leave all? Some of us take it seriously. It was really sad to watch the guy fall apart and start crying in the middle of the bar. Okay, Tom, pull yourself together. There's some more information you really need to know about, I told him. Really? How much worse can it get? He asks. Well, actually a lot worse. The good news is that everything else is already up and running. Nothing else will be added unless you mess it up again. Please tell me things will get better for me, he pleaded. Well, they might get better, depending on your actions. At least things certainly won't get worse. First, I have to tell you about my new job. I now work for your old company. I'm the director of engineering, and I work directly for the CEO, your former father-in-law. He's going to retire in 6 months, and I'm going to be named the new CEO. I guess that was your plan before you screwed it up. Further, it's not that the owner of your company and your ex-father-in-law hate each other. In fact, they're more like friendly rivals. What's more, on Friday, the three of us are going golfing. Stan, former father-in-law, has realized that without a job, you won't be able to pay his daughter's court-ordered child support and alimony. He discussed it with your new boss and found you the job you have now. Well, at least it can't get any worse. I'll be able to start working for this company, and hopefully she'll marry the guy she's dating and cancel the child support payments. Yeah, I wouldn't count on that too much. I highly doubt you'll advance in your company. Sure, you'll get a yearly cost of living increase, but you'll stay in your current position. No one trusts you enough to promote you. I let that sink in for a couple minutes and then continued. Let me show you a couple pictures of my new bride and her kids. I displayed another picture on my phone screen. I guess it was a bit of a shock because it took him a minute or two to respond. This, my... Your ex-wife, yes, confirmed I. And these are your children. My children? Yes. Do you know they call me Daddy now? I guess since you haven't seen them for a couple years, it's only natural. Inam is now the only grown man in their lives. You're dating my ex-wife? He exclaimed. Actually, we're engaged, replied I. Our wedding is scheduled for April 2027. He thought for a moment. Then it hit him. Wait a minute. My last alimony payment to her is in March 2027. Yeah, I know. She refused to marry me until then. She wants to drain all the blood out of you. You should have known better than to piss off the red-headed Irish woman. You have a double dose of anger management issues. You've got a famous Irish temper, and then you've got a famous redhead temper, too. It's a bad combination. I thought we were friends. How can you do this to me? Well, I thought we were friends, too. Until I found out you had my wife. But I didn't even know she was your wife, he complained. Never mind. You knew she was someone else's wife. Maybe you should have found out whose wife she was before you slept with her. Oh my God. Could it get any worse? You really shouldn't ask that. It will jinx you. It could always get worse. On the other hand, you still have to pay child support for 10 years. Eventually, the kids will start dropping out of the family when they turn 18. Unfortunately, it is likely that you will still be paying child support for some time to come. Once the first couple of children turn 18, you can use that money to double your payments. Unfortunately, unless you make a real impression on your boss, you will likely be fired as soon as the last child support payment is made. In addition, there are a few other angry husbands who really want their pound of flesh from you. For now, I have convinced them to hold off because if you are injured, you won't be able to work and continue to make payments on time. When you're done with your payments, you'll have no incentive to procrastinate anymore. Anyway, it was a pleasure meeting you tonight. Maybe we'll meet again at the next conference. I'll take care of the check since you seem to be having money problems. I paid the check and left him to ponder his future existence. A beautiful red-headed girl sat at a table in the corner and watched the conversation. She watched as the tall, well-built man stood up, paid the check, and left the bar. She saw the devastation on the other man's face. Of course, she knew what had just happened. Still, she had compassion. The poor, broken man could use some good karma. Yes, he deserved everything that had happened to him, but judgment laced with mercy was always better. After all, people can learn from their mistakes, so giving them a chance to redeem themselves is always good for society. The red-haired goddess noticed a tall, slender blonde enter the bar and looked around. She was already familiar with this blonde and had already arranged for her to visit Karma. The redhead smiled. Worst-case scenario, she would move her plans to the blonde. Either way, her fate was sealed. The redhead closed her eyes and concentrated. Suddenly, a few more customers entered the bar and took all the available seats. The only free seat left was behind the bar next to the devastated man. Having no other choice, the blonde walked confidently over to him and sat down. Karma smiled. Now it was all about whether the devastated man would get some relief or ruin his life further. Throwing a quick glance at the muscular 6'2" tall man, clearly overdressed, sitting alone in a dark booth at the back of the bar, the red-headed goddess decided to let things take their course. It had been a long month for the beautiful red-haired girl. She needed to relax for one night. After casting another spell to ensure that the devastated man would not be seriously harmed but should be able to work to pay his court-ordered payments, she decided to relax for the rest of the evening. The waitress, clearly exhausted and overworked, placed another glass in front of her. The red-haired girl, whose name was Karma, saw the pain in the waitress's eyes. She saw that life had been hard on her and that she didn't deserve what she had been through. She saw that this woman was a very honest and decent person who had been dealt a shitty hand. It was time to get a strong dose of good karma. Sipping her drink, she dipped into her archives to get to the bottom of the situation. She learned everything she needed to know. The next time she made her move, she stopped at her kiosk. "What time are you getting off, dear?" she asked. It'll be another 2 hours, but I don't meet with clients," followed the reply. "Besides, I really need to get home to take care of my daughter." "What good is being a goddess if you can't use it to your advantage sometimes?" she thought. Suddenly, the brunette waitress's cell phone rang. She answered it. The gist of the conversation was that the waitress's daughter was already asleep, and her teenage nanny was willing to stay the night at no extra charge. She was disoriented when she woke up in her own bed the next day. "Well, now that everything is settled, I'm in room 512. Don't worry, I'll have you home just in time for breakfast tomorrow morning to make her breakfast. I'm sure it's just what you need. Seriously, she's a freaking goddess. No one can resist her." The brunette passed out in exhaustion on the luxurious bed in the luxury suite. Waking up the next morning in her own bed, she was disoriented by the memories of the night before. The goddess awoke with a sigh of resignation, realizing that she would never be able to have a real relationship. Nevertheless, she was content to have it all figured out and take care of the waitress. She'd have to settle for just the occasional date she'd managed to arrange. Epilogue. Tom failed the test of redemption. He used his expense account to buy a married blonde a drink and talk her into staying in his hotel room. Unfortunately for both of them, she didn't survive the long entreaties. In fact, it's still undecided whether he talked her into it or she talked him into it. Either way, her jealous husband, who was watching the whole thing in disguise, destroyed Tom's testicles to the point where he would never have an erection again. He then used a prenup to divorce the blonde and leave her with only the clothes on her back when she left. Now she's a prostitute working for a rather abusive pimp in a bad part of town. Strangely enough, a week after a sexual tryst between a red-haired goddess and a brunette waitress, an expensive Lexus SUV suddenly breaks down in front of the bar. As luck would have it, the rich woman sat in the booth served by the brunette beauty. Through a coincidence of strange circumstances, the rich woman sat in the stall for several hours before her car was towed away. During that time, they got to know each other well. It took a few nudges, nothing that either of them wanted, but more to push things along. Eventually, the rich woman became a regular at the bar. She always sat in the section that the attractive brunette occupied. It took some time, but eventually they hit it off. The brunette's family rejected her because of her coming out as a lesbian. Her child was the result of her father's friends raping her in an attempt to make her straight. "My name is Karma. I'm a bitch." The rich woman ended up owning the factory where the brunette's family worked. They all got laid off and lost their homes. I drop in on them from time to time. One Christmas, when her siblings brought their children to a fundraiser to get Christmas presents, she graciously offered to buy gifts for her nieces and nephews for Christmas. She even invited the entire family to her home for Christmas dinner. She used this opportunity to show her prejudiced family the love and respect for each other in her home. It didn't solve all the problems, but it was a start. Tom? Well, what can I say? I gave him a chance to help himself. The main problem after that night was that his testicles were so badly damaged that he was never able to get an erection again. As soon as his last biological child turned 18 and graduated from high school, he was fired from the company he worked for. Because of his past, he could no longer work in the industry. He ended up becoming an alcoholic assistant manager at Taco Bell. I really tried to help him, but his decisions never got better. What can I say? I really am a bitch. And the blonde? Well, she's never been anywhere near as pretty as she used to be. When facial features are damaged to that extent, it takes a lot of money to fix it. A week ago, her ex-husband discovered a banker's box hidden in the wall in the house he'd inherited. He managed to leave the country before he was reported missing. Rumor has it that he is now living very well in the tropics. Oh, you might want to know about Mary. Her case was a very sad one. She eventually repented of her evil deeds, but unfortunately it was too late. Steve forgave her on his deathbed. She contracted HIV from her third lover after Steve divorced her. Unfortunately, she found out too late. Yeah, she was really remorseful. I visited her towards the end. The best thing I could do for her was to make her leaving as easy and painless as possible. Okay, so maybe I went a little overboard with her karma. What can I say? I'm only... Okay, I'm not only human. Still, I put karma on those who deserve it. Yes, I made sure her lawyer was incompetent. Yes, I made sure her ex-husband could manipulate their finances to his advantage. Yes, I made sure the prenup was fully honored, but it was her subsequent decisions that led her fate to where it came to. She had options. She didn't need to become a prostitute downtown. She didn't need to take High as a client. She had other options. Okay, I used her to create bad karma for another one of her clients. Of course, what alerted me was that his wife had already stopped having sex with him. Now that she's divorced him, she's doing much better. Anyway, that's the end of this chapter. Everyone got what they deserved. Some got more than they should have, but that's just the way things are. Anyway, I've got other things to do now. Some asshole is going to try to scam an innocent widow out of her life savings. Yeah, I prefer to hand out good karma, but every now and then I really like to give assholes what they deserve. I have different looks, but I prefer my normal appearance, a little red-headed girl with green eyes. Look around wherever you are if you are thinking about doing something wrong. You should think twice if you see someone like me up close. Maybe I'm watching.